Hey everyone, this is Alpaco and the Panasonic GH6 is going to be announced in just a couple days. There are some leaks about it, and so far it's incredible for filmmakers. I'm sure you've all seen the specs and all the leaks out of it, and it's really remarkable. I personally don't see how they can keep this thing so cheap. Just because it has a micro four thirds sensor doesn't mean it's any less of a camera. That's like comparing the smaller Super 35 sensor out of the ARRI Alexa to the full frame sensor of the Sony FX9. The ARRI Alexa is a smaller sensor, so technically it does have less dynamic range. It does have less megapixels and it doesn't have any autofocus features at all. It's certainly not looked at as lesser of a camera. If anything, it's the cinema standard. Full frame doesn't mean better quality. Sensor size also has nothing to do with your talent as a filmmaker or photographer. I'm comparing the ARRI Alexa because that's the camera that introduced dual gain output, or DGO. Essentially what happens is the sensor reads out the highlights and the shadows at the same exact time, and then it outputs a high dynamic range image. The ARRI Alexa does this with a global sensor, so there's no jello effect. The Alexa also does this up to 120 frames per second and an open gate up to 90. The only other cameras that have dual gain output sensors is the Canon C300 Mark III and the Canon C70. Both amazing cameras, both smaller Super 35 sensors, both are also much more expensive than the GH6. The Canon DGO sensor, however, is a rolling shutter, so that jello effect does exist, and above 60 frames per second, I believe it switches to a standard readout. This is still an incredible feat to achieve for the cost. Now the GH6 seems to have something very similar to this. Panasonic calls it Dynamic Range Boost. They seem to have dumped the dual ISO technology in favor of this new dual gain-like technology. This is, of course, reading through a spec sheet, so I could be wrong. The GH6 will be able to record 5.6K up to 60p in Dynamic Range Boost. This is a huge step up in capabilities, and because of the smaller sensor size, it most likely won't have that jello effect. A few months ago, I stated that my dream Olympus cinema camera would have a DGO sensor. Watch that video so you can make fun of my drawing abilities. I'm impressed that Panasonic did go this route and just decided not to use their own dual native ISO tech, but I guess everyone has stolen their tech anyway, so they probably decided to move on from it. I'm not actively a Panasonic shooter. As a majority of what I do is photography based, I get everything I need and more from my GH5S. The GH5S is already larger than I'd like in a camera body, and this new GH6 is even larger. So as cool as this camera is, and as much as I'd love to have it, I'm probably not going to go with it, especially since it's only 315 autofocus points, where the OM1 has over 1,000. For a video, this isn't a big deal. I almost exclusively manually focus for most jobs I do, but for sports and wildlife and things like this is absolutely a big deal to buy when I'm considering buying a new camera. This brings me to my last thought. There is clearly a divide in user groups for these two cameras. OM1 is clearly for that niche of photographers, and the GH6 is in that niche of filmmakers. They are marketing their cameras well for who they already know is their customer bases. But is that the right move? I'm not entirely clear if that's a smart tactic or not. Everyone has wanted to move on from MFT has already moved on. There are people out there that switch systems frequently, so they'll most likely buy, but there's no real longevity there. I tend to be more personable with my cameras and stick to what I know. It's important to me to be able to work a camera like it's a part of my body. Will these two cameras be enough to keep the 4/3 system alive as a viable hybrid option? Who knows? But as long as my camera is working, I'll most likely still be shooting with it. If you guys are looking for a more Panasonic-centric channel, follow Rhett. He's a talented filmmaker that also has a web series coming out, and they could use your support to get their web series funded to complete. See the links below for details. Follow Rhett and check out everything he has to say about the GH6. I hope you enjoy whatever camera you have. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.